Hello, students and teachers of English A Language and Literature for the IB Diploma program. It's Brad Philpott here with another little video on Paper 1. And today, as a former Paper 1 examiner, I'd like to just give you 10 tips and tricks on how to do well. What should you do and what should you not do? Tip number 1, reading. Read carefully. It's a reading exam, essentially. You get 5 minutes of silent reading. I recommend checking out the little text above the text that explains when and where it was written. Once you are allowed to grab a pen, annotate the heck out of that thing, right? I've done a whole little video on how to analyze Paper 1 stimulus texts effectively. And in that, I recommend coming with a checklist, like CAMPS, context, audience, meaning, purpose, style. Those are some things to look out for. It helps to have a lens through which you can look at the text. Tip 2, planning. Come with a plan, make an outline. Use this pyramid of purpose that I talk about in a separate video called Paper 1 Planning. And don't make it up as you go along or write disjointed separate paragraphs, one on audience, here's a paragraph on style, another one on purpose. That's not textual analysis, that's not guided textual analysis or Paper 1 response. So I don't recommend doing that. Introductions, tip 3. Let's talk about these. I like a good hook. It does show some interpretation and knowledge of the text, but avoid sweeping generalizations. A good introduction should explore context, text type, and audience in very nuanced ways. I think when you put yourself in the shoes of the reader of the text, you're more likely to notice these things in nuanced ways. Students who get the text type wrong or write about it in very general terms don't tend to do well on Paper 1. And it's okay for a text to be multiple things at the same time. Website, interview, article, right? All of those things can coexist. Tip number 4, thesis statements. Again, I've done a whole separate video on this, but briefly, make sure you include some big ideas in your thesis statements about purpose, and make sure you answer the guiding question. Don't ignore the guiding question altogether, or even write your own guiding question. I know technically you're allowed to do that, but I don't recommend it. And definitely, please don't just list a bunch of stylistic features in your thesis statement. Point number 5 relates to PEAL, point, evidence, explain, link, which I also explore in another video. But the points that appear in your topic sentences should make a good claim, right, about the author's choices for style and how they connect to that author's intent or purpose, right? Please don't just list features or lose sight of the guiding question in your topic sentence. And this leads me to the next tip, 6, on evidence. You're going to want to set up a quotation, a quote that supports that point that you just made. It shouldn't just be kind of airdropped in there. It should have a logical, coherent connection between the point you made and the example that you're providing. It's also really clever if you can group or cluster multiple examples of the same feature. Examiners like it when you do that. And that sets up the explanation or the analysis, which comes in the middle of a paragraph. And here's where you argue a logical connection between the authorial choices, the reader's response, and the writer's intent, right? I see students making these huge cognitive leaps, assuming that I understand everything they understand. Walk me through these steps. Walk me through the logic, right? And don't summarize the stimulus text. So tip number 8, link back to the topic sentence and the guiding question continually, especially in that last sentence of the paragraph. I tend to look at those, and I'm expecting to see some evaluation in there too. Criterion B, analysis and evaluation. To what extent are the author's choices effective in making the reader feel a certain way, respond a certain way? Evaluate the text. Don't end paragraphs abruptly, and don't lose sight of the so what question. Why did the writer write this in the first place? Conclusions. Let's touch on those briefly. It's okay to repeat some of the main ideas that you mentioned throughout your Paper 1 response. Don't just summarize everything though. That's a fine line. I understand that. It's okay to evaluate some more, commenting on the effectiveness of the text and achieving its aims. Make sure you return to that hook. And don't run out of time altogether for a conclusion. Paper ones that miss a conclusion don't do very well. So I recommend that. Let's talk handwriting. Last point here. It's good to practice this under timed exam conditions. I do recommend skipping every other line. It just gives you and the examiner some space to think. If you need to rewrite a word, scratch a word, cross a word out right above it, you can. Please don't use too many arrows, asterisks, making this like a huge puzzle for examiners to figure out. Don't rush through paper one. I think writing a shorter response that's more nuanced and sophisticated and careful is better than a long, rushed, hurried exam that the examiner can't read. All right, so those are 10 tips and tricks on how to do well on paper one. If you like this video and if you want to see worksheets that go with it and other resources, check out our resources on philpott.education. I look forward to seeing you on the platform. Best of luck on those paper one exams. Bye-bye.